Simla, Algeria.
Otto Preis, Austria.
Ruth Laserson, Paris, France.
Paul Itzkin, Latvia.
Asher Horowitz, Uftergod, Hungary.
Levi Bergvanden, Amsterdam.
Betty Metz, Denmark.
Malka Rosenberg, Paris, France.
Louis Levy, Stettin, Germany.
Jacob Kroglik, Luxembourg.
Marcel Kutsian, Zutphen.
Elise Kopel, Romania.
For those of you who are just joining us, we are reading just a few of the names of those lost in the Holocaust. Please continue to come in and sit and join us. Anna Kushner, Estonia.
Shlomo Gross, Tarnow, Poland.
Marcel Dadowitz, Italy.
Emma Moscato, Italy.
Zlata Eisenberg, Ukraine.
Jean Schmella, Tunisia.
Hakon Laksov, Oslo, Norway.
Amalie Levy, Edelbert, Luxembourg.
Edmund Mayara, Algeria.
Julius Newman, Austria.
Janka Coleman, Finland.
Jacob Kaplan, Manchester.
Sarah Silver, Belgium.
David Belaish, Algeria.
Chaim Wasserman, Denmark.
Isaac Moutal, Paris, France.
Rachel Gluck, Lithuania.
Leva Kamusowicz, Poland.
Judith Reed, Rotterdam.
Emma Herskovitz, Romania.
Hirsch Brashinsky, Estonia.
Noto Rosinko, Russia.
Rika Goldberg, Poland.
Josephine Judels, Amsterdam.
Zalman Axelrod, Ukraine.
Victor Cohen, Tunisia.
Nachum Moin, Latvia.
Nelly Goldstein, Hadaz, Hungary.
Sophia Dondorp, Harlem.
Eric Lemberger, Austria.
Zalman Passman, Finland.
Walter Schenk, Bernburg, Germany.
Oskar Rosenwasser, Budapest, Hungary.
Michael Turiel, Italy.
Dorothy Pollock, Denmark.
Abram Shia, Paris, France.
Yakov Gelbert, Benden, Poland.
Rene Rudel, Luxembourg.
Rosa Apfel, Austria.
Ephraim Berkowitz, Romania.
Shmuel Sermon, Estonia.
Hanan Kaplan, Trondheim, Norway.
Menachem Starkman, Luxembourg.
Ola Barmi, Tunisia.
Lisbeth Grabowski, Gleiwitz, Germany.
Shmuel Techlel, Belgium.
For those of you who just joined us, We are reading just a few of the names of those lost in the Holocaust. Yefing Mering, Finland.
Solomon Pinkowitz, Grodno, Poland.
Jacob Mikrenberg, Belgium.
David Fishbaum, Paris, France.
Lena Davrosin, Russia.
Katja van Leeuwen, Netherlands.
Berta Schreiber, Estonia.
Noah Hirschhorn, Latvia.
Israel Borowski, Poland.
Maurice Moadi, Tunisia.
Nechama Fagin, Russia.
Olga Hirsch, Budapest, Hungary.
Levi Glaschok, Rotterdam.
Heinrich Handler, Austria.
Kurt Hupert, Finland.
Sophie Stern, Frankfurt, Germany.
Orbat Khan, Pest, Hungary.
Moritz Phillips, Zutphen.
Gabrielle Salmonson, Denmark.
Julius Seligman, Paris, France.
Jacob Kiedel, Susek, Poland.
Marcel Darwitz, Luxembourg.
Carmela Forti, Italy.
Freda Katz, Romania.
Israel Kushner, Estonia.
Chaya Sperling, Gora Kalwaria, Poland.
Jacob Mikrenberg, Belgium.
Desiata Israel, Italy.
Leib Altschuler, Belarusia.
Chaya Taik, Estonia.
Israel Damelin, Zagare, Lithuania.
Anna Goldfinger, Poland.
Moshe Sayag, Algeria.
Susie Barkowitz, Austria.
Chaim
Every structure
Nata,
actually will be destroyed.
Tunisia.
Every
Hertz
structure actually will be
Kaplan,
destroyed.
Trondheim, Norway.
And there will be no stone upon another.
Naftali Weisverher, Belgium.
Gertruda Eichel, Vogtwed.
Helene Sipikov, Denmark.
Yefim Mering, Finland.
Samuel Davrosin,
Every
Russia.
structure actually will be destroyed.
Nita Steiner, Switzerland, Hungary.
Hartog Blomendal, Amsterdam.
Carmen and Bertha Perlak, Croatia.
Sarah Passman, Finland.
Tony Siegel, Oslo, Norway.
Olga Hirschfeld, Pegs, Hungary.
Yom Tov Galante, Italy.
Fruma Indik, Romania.
Kurt Passman, Finland.
Benno Damelin, Oslo, Norway.
Marcel Darowich, Luxembourg.
Yosef Notrika, Italy.
Manya Arbitman, Ukraine.
Mayer Harrisberg, Paris, France.
Nessa Brouwer, Latvia.
Samuel Tehuel,
Every structure
Belgium.
actually will be destroyed.
Albert Amsterdam.
Every structure actually will be destroyed.
Joseph Kellner, Austria.
Eva Levin, Estonia.
Natan Kirsch, Latvia.
Moshe Coopersmith, Lithuania.
Leendert Bos, Amsterdam.
Isaac Diamant, Denmark.
Thank you for listening to this portion of today's service, and we hope you'll continue to stay here for the next part.
Hello, good afternoon. How is everyone? So we're the young adult choir from the church at Bethel's Family. Thank you so much for having us here at the March of Remembrance. All right. Amen. Okay, we're ready. Okay. So while we're waiting, I guess we need to introduce ourselves. Yolanda, Whitney, Sarah, feel free to worship. Feel free to worship. My God is awesome. He can move mountains. Keep me in the valley. Hide me from the rain. My God is awesome. Heals me when I'm broken. Strength where I've been weak. And forever He will reign. My God is. He can move. Keep me in. Hide me. My God is. Heals me when I'm strength where I forever. Oh, my God Savior of the whole world, giver of salvation, by His stripes you are healed. My God is. Today I am forgiven. His strength is around me. Praise His holy name. Oh, my God is. Oh, yes, you are God. How many of y'all believe that? Awesome. Oh, awesome. My God is awesome. Awesome. Can y'all clap your hands like this? Awesome. Oh, He's mighty. He's mighty. He's mighty. He's mighty. Awesome. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, He's great. He's great. He's great. He's great. Lord, you are awesome. So you can turn it off. He's holy. He's holy. He's holy. Waymaker, Lord, you are awesome. Lord, protector, 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 protector. Yes, you are. Oh, my God is, He can move, He can move. Keep me in. I need. Oh, my God is strength where forever.
Priscilla and Aquila.
Praise His holy name. My God is awesome, awesome. Awesome, awesome. My God is awesome. Wants to fall with your power, perform miracles. There is nothing, nothing that's impossible. And we're standing here only because you made, you moved mountains, you caused the walls, with your power, perform miracles. There is nothing, nothing, and we're standing here only because, and we're standing here only because, and we're standing here only because you made a way.
gather today to remember the atrocities of the debaucheries and the atrocities of the past. and we also enter a new season of recognizing that God will hasten his word and he keeps his promise. I'm reminded of the prophet Jeremiah when he spoke and said, "You will be a voice to the nations." And then later he said to Jeremiah, he says, "What do you see?" And then he said, "I will hasten my word, I will perform my word." We know that God always keeps his promise. And regardless of the things that we see and go on around us, that one day, even as the prophet Micah said, that one day all peoples will gather at the mountain of the Lord, put aside their weapons of warfare for harvesting tools together. I want to take a special moment just to recognize some of our guests here today, and especially to all of our Holocaust survivors, their family members, and descendants. We also want to specifically recognize the Consul General Gilad Katz of Israel, and to, amen, Consul General Thomas Meister of Germany, the Honorary Consul Philip Aronoff of Hungary, the Deputy Consul and current Acting Consul General Ryuji Iwasaki of Japan, and as well as all the additional consular staff and dignitaries. We want to also recognize those who were the liberators, the rescuers, the World War II veterans, and their descendants, and special guests that are here from Germany. Recognizing also university and college professors, Rice University, Texas A&M Galveston, Lone Star College, and others, as well as others educators from additional institutions. We want to thank all the rabbis and pastors from a wide variety of synagogues and churches that have joined together today. And we also want to recognize the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commissioners, community, business, and ministry leaders, and all the students that are here. Lord, we come before you, even as King Hezekiah, when he said, "This is a day of trouble and distress. For the children are ready to come forth, but there is no strength to deliver." Lord, we saw the atrocities of the past. We saw the challenges that have come against those who are called by you, our Jewish brothers and sisters, who suffered at the hands of a world that stayed silent. But today, Lord, we recognize together as we cross our barriers, our racial, ethnic, denominational barriers in our faiths, to come together to say never again. Lord, help us to walk into the future and one day to be able to put aside all the weapons of warfare for harvesting tools together as we gather at Mount Zion. Lord, we also recognize the importance of being a voice, not just in our words, but in our actions, to stand together and to declare together that we will not see this happen again, but we stand together shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm with our Jewish brothers and sisters. Amen.
It's an honor to join you this afternoon, this very important occasion here in Houston, Texas at Rice University. My name is Brian Strauss, and I'm a rabbi at Congregation Beth Yeshurun. Most importantly, I'm the descendant of Holocaust survivors, and unfortunately, I'm the descendant of people that were murdered in the Holocaust. 25 years ago, I had the honor of visiting Poland to see the places where my great-grandparents, great-aunts, great-uncles, and countless relatives and friends were murdered because they were Jewish. I had the opportunity to visit Treblinka, the worst of the death camps, where almost 1 million Jews were murdered in just 11 months. There I saw the place where my great-grandmother was murdered. I'll never forget being there at Treblinka, one of the worst places on earth, one of the places where humanity treated other humanity in the worst possible way. I remember thinking to myself, and perhaps it was an inspiration for my great-grandmother, and I remembered three things that I think my relatives, my ancestors were communicating to me. Thank you for remembering. Continue the work, and always share with your non-Jewish friends and neighbors on what really happened. Today, I would say the same three things to all of you gathered here this afternoon. Thank you for remembering. Continue the work and share with your non-Jewish friends and neighbors in remembering what happened so it never happens again. We are very blessed in 2018 to live in a time where we still have survivors with us. But unfortunately, that will not always be the case. So it's incumbent upon us and younger generations, Jews and non-Jews, Christians and Muslims, people of all faiths, to remember what happened during those horrible years in Europe because of the Nazi Munster, to make sure that it does not happen again. That is our responsibility. I believe that's what God wants us to do. And I thank everyone for following God's commandment to remember what happened. Today we say never again. And we don't just say never again, we also say never again by our actions, by gathering together, by marching today, by remembering what happened. We don't just say never again, we act on never again. In the Jewish tradition, memorial stones are what laid at a cemetery when we lose a loved one. In the Jewish tradition, we don't leave flowers at a cemetery because flowers die. We leave stones, rocks. They are more permanent. They are more of a permanent reminder of a love we may have had for someone who's passed away in our family. Today, it's my honor to call upon a survivor, Ruth Steinfeld, and her daughter, Susan Ehrenstein, is Ruth will pour a few memorial stones from a ceramic pitcher into a container held by her daughter, Susan, to symbolize the transferring of the responsibility for testifying about the Holocaust from one generation to the next. As they say in Hebrew, lador vador, from generation to generation. And it's my honor to bestow blessings upon our survivor, Ruth Steinfeld, a woman who continues, like so many survivors in our community, to inspire us every single day. Along with her daughter, Susan, we bestow upon the two of you the blessings of our people. Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmarecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yuneka, Yisar Adonai panav elecha v'yasam lecha shalom. May God always bless and keep you. May God always show you his favor and be gracious to you. May God always show you kindness and give the two of you, along with all of our survivors, the blessings of shalom, the blessings of peace. And let us all say, Amen. Finally, it is my honor this afternoon to remind all of us never to be bystanders. Too many people in Europe did nothing. They sat by, remained quiet, did not enough to help their fellow Jews. Today we pledge never to be bystanders, but to be upstanders, to get involved when any minority is persecuted, to stand up for those whose rights are trampled upon, no matter who they are. Today, we are upstanders. And so I'd like to call upon different groups of people to make that pledge, and when I call upon your particular group, please remain standing. First, any Holocaust survivors, their family members, and descendants that are here this afternoon, please rise and remain standing. Repeat after me, we are upstanders. Foreign consuls and their staff, please rise. We are upstanders. Liberator descendants, please rise. And please repeat after me, we are upstanders. Special guests from Germany, we are upstanders. University and college professors, as well as other educators that are with us this afternoon, we are upstanders. Rabbis that are here this afternoon, we are upstanders. Pastors that have gathered with us this afternoon, we are upstanders. Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commissioners, we are upstanders. Business and ministry leaders, we are upstanders. Students of Rice University and other students high school, college, middle school, all students that have gathered here with us this afternoon. We are upstanders. And all those in our audience today, please rise, those who commit to be upstanders always. Please, let's all now repeat after me. We are upstanders. Thank you for being here today. You may be seated.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. This is my 8th March of Remembrance, and I am always amazed. But this is my story. I was helped and am here because of Righteous Gentile, or the way we call now, Righteous Among the Nation. The ballet you showed us just before was to represent Kristallnacht, the night of the broken crystal, the night that changed my life forever. Because the Nazis came into my home, destroyed everything, and took my father and grandfather to the first internment camp. It was called Dachau. It later became a death camp. It was created for the German people who didn't want to be Nazis, and now the Jews. Short time later, October 1940, all the Jews were rounded up again. My father somehow made it home, and we were sent to a jail to await the trucks to take us to the train, the boxcars, and we wound up in southwest France, the border of Spain, a camp called Camp de Gurs, G-U-R-S. There were 34 camps in France. I only have a few minutes, so I just want to read to you something that Elie Wiesel wrote, and it means a lot to us here and to all of us in the future. In the dark years of World War II, there was darkness everywhere. In heaven and on earth, all the gates of compassion seemed to have been closed. The killers killed, and the Jews died. And the outside world adopted an attitude of either of complicity or indifference. Only a few had the courage to care. These few righteous men and women were poor and weak and vulnerable and afraid and helpless. What then made them different from their fellow citizens? What compelled them to disregard danger and torture and choose humanity? What moved them to put their own lives in jeopardy for the sake of saving one Jewish child, one Jewish mother? And above all, why were there so few? Was it that perilous to oppose evil? Was it really impossible to help? Was it really impossible to resist organized, systemized, legalized cruelty and murder by showing concern for the victims, for one victim? For it is our profound belief that in remembering the Holocaust, we must not be numbed by the magnitude of its horrors. We must allow ourselves to be moved by the humanity the victims succeeded in preserving at all times. And we humbly and gratefully look at these few individuals who, out of their religious belief or their humanistic education, with a simple gesture, often acting on impulse, became our protector, better yet, our allies. Each and every one of them is a reminder of what so many others could have done, of what so many others have not done. So this is what I would like to leave with you. I lost my whole family. We came to Houston in 1948, and two beautiful gentlemen came to the train station to pick my sister and I up. My sister was just a year older than me. I was 14, she was 15, and a gentleman by the name of Wolf Finkelman and his friend Leon Cooper came to the train station. We were scared. We didn't know. Men to us meant problems. And yet they were so kind and so wonderful. And here in this audience is the son of Wolf Finkelman. His name is Steve Finkelman. And I would like to introduce you now to our rescuer's son, Steve Finkelman.
Thank you, Ruth. Of course, ironically, my dad married another woman whose name is Ruth also. So I've been asked today to share briefly my dad's story. So the saying goes, you don't know what you have until you've lost it. But some of us never had, but we know. I never knew my dad's parents, my grandparents. The Nazis murdered my dad's entire family, his mother, father, 3 brothers, 3 sisters, countless aunts, uncles, and cousins, all gone by the time my dad was 15 years old. My father, Wolf Finkelman, of blessed memory, had a fairly ordinary childhood. He was born in Savin, a small town. When he was 3 years old, his family moved to Glugau. My grandfather eked out a meager living as a shoemaker, but somehow everybody had what they needed and life was good. Everything changed one day in September 1939 when the Nazis invaded Poland. My dad was 11 years old. Jews had to wear yellow stars of David on their clothing. There were arbitrary beatings and harassment. Not long after, the Jews of the village were marched 8 miles away to the Rzeszów ghetto. Hunger, starvation, killings, and beatings were constant. People begging and dying in the streets. Then deportations began. Jews were ordered to gather at the former cemetery. They underwent a selection. Some were chosen to work, and others were taken to the nearby forest and shot. Groups of Jews were marched to the town's train station, packed in cattle cars, and transported to Belzec, where they were gassed immediately upon arrival. Included in these series of deportations were my dad's parents, sisters, and youngest brother. My father and his 2 older brothers escaped by hiding on a rooftop behind a chimney, where they watched all that was happening below. My dad and his brothers were incredibly fortunate to avoid or escape numerous selections over the next year until the final liquidation of the ghetto took place on September 3rd, 1943. Because Belzec had been shut down by then, my dad and his brothers were sent to a nearby transit camp called Shebnia. They were only there for 2 months, at which point my dad and his younger brother were loaded into a cattle car, again with no food or restroom facilities. Older brother Henry was kept behind for cleanup detail. The following day, after the work had been completed, Henry's group was taken to a nearby forest and shot. After 3 days, the train arrived at Auschwitz. Many had already died on the trip from suffocation and/or starvation. Henry, my dad's older brother, had been able to sneak some extra bread to my father and Heel, so when they arrived at Auschwitz, they were in relatively better condition than most others. The Germans were shouting, the dogs were barking, everybody was lined up and marched by the camp doctor, who pointed his finger left or right, signifying which way to proceed. Of course, that doctor was probably Dr. Joseph Mengele. Age was the principal criteria for selection. Sometimes they would be asked their age or occupation. My dad, fortunately, lied about both. He claimed to be 17 and a mechanic. In truth, he wasn't yet 15 and had no skills at all. My father was sent to the right. His brother Heel was sent to the left, to the gas chambers. That day, my dad was tattooed with the number 161073. He was selected for work duty in a nearby camp called Schwentzlowitz. Auschwitz was liberated by the Russian army on January 27, 1945. In the weeks leading up, the Nazis sent many, including my dad, on what became to be known as the Death March to Mauthausen in the bitter cold of winter. Mauthausen became overcrowded, and my dad was sent to another satellite camp called Gunskirchen. It consisted mostly of barracks and sheds in the woods, surrounded by high barbed wire. One day in May 1945, the German guards abandoned the camp. There were about 15,000 prisoners there. Only a few thousand were alive when the 71st Division of the United States Army liberated the camp on May 4th, 1945. My father ended up in a nearby displaced persons camp, Bindenbuchel, run by the Allies. He immigrated to the United States the following year and arrived in New York Harbor as he turned 18 years old. Jewish communities across the United States accepted these children, and by the good graces of the Lord, my dad ended up here in Houston. As I say, hallelujah. That's good. In Houston, my dad attended school, ironically, with veterans just like those who had saved his life. After graduation, he got a job and eventually married, had 3 wonderful children, right? I'm a little biased, and he built a successful career. In 2010, at the age of 81, he passed away after a courageous battle with cancer. Survivor stories are like fingerprints. No two are alike. Yet, what they do have in common is the role played by luck. Survivors could have lived bitter lives, carrying the burden of their pain and hurt. Who could blame them? We live in a society today where this is very common. Yet, by and large, Holocaust survivors, such as my dad, chose a different path. They refused to let Hitler ruin their lives and therefore add to his list of so-called accomplishments. Instead, they chose the path of life. They rebuilt their lives and they rebuilt their families. They built communities and they built businesses. They became contributors to society. What a great lesson and a great legacy that is. Once survivors had secured their own future, they increasingly devoted their later years to sharing their own personal stories and pleading with anyone who would listen to learn the lessons of intolerance and discrimination. That's why I know my dad would be so proud of me standing up here in front of you today, but even more impressed that so many of you chose to be here today to hear his story. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Victoria Sorvati, and I am here to read a proclamation. Besides the one that was given to us by the mayor, I'm going to also bring this one to you from our Congressman Ted Poe. In honor of March of Remembrance 2018 Congressional Proclamation, whereas March of Remembrance is a memorial walk taken annually since 2007 on Yom HaShoah, Day of Holocaust Remembrance. This year, the march will begin at Rice University Memorial Grand Hall and Chapel and end at Congregation Emmanuel, the site of this city's year-wide Yom HaShoah commemoration. And whereas March of Remembrance is an American response to the March of Life that is held in Europe, the purpose of the March of Remembrance is to educate a generation that is many times unaware of the reality of the Holocaust. And whereas there are still over 175,000 Holocaust survivors in the United States, listening to their stories of the past teaches us for the future. And whereas we remember those who were lost in the Holocaust, those who fought for freedom, the soldiers who fought and sacrificed in World War II, and those who risked it for all victims. And now, therefore, I, Ted Poe, Member of Congress representing the 2nd Congressional District of Texas, do hereby declare April 15th, 2018 as a day to honor, educate, remember, and engage the Holocaust. God in Texas, Ted Poe, Member of Congress, Texas.
We also have a proclamation from our United States Senator Ted Cruz. Dear friends, on Yom HaShoah, we stand together to remember the Holocaust. I write this year with additional sadness and heartbreak. In 1942, a 9-year-old girl named Muriel Knoll fled Paris, France with her family as the Nazis engaged in the mass arrest of 13,000 Jewish men, women, and children, called the Vel d'Hiv Roundup. The majority of those arrested were sent to Auschwitz, never to return home. Last month, this kind and sweet 85-year-old Holocaust survivor who moved back to Paris after World War II was murdered in her apartment. The New York Times reported this murder on March 28, 2018. Mrs. Knoll was stabbed to death, barbarically murdered, simply because she was Jewish. Her body was burned as the attackers attempted to set her apartment on fire. This horrific and vicious attack is just one example of the rising hatred that fuels anti-Semitism all over the world, particularly in Europe, and unfortunately on college campuses across the United States. Today we remember Muriel Knoll and send prayers to her family, as well as all who have been victims of anti-Semitic attacks. We remember the 6 million Jews who were murdered. We remember the families who lost loved ones. We remember all those who were persecuted. We remember the resilience of the survivors. We remember the heroism of civilians and soldiers who risked their lives to save the innocent. We remember to ensure each new generation is educated about the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime and its goal to exterminate the Jewish people. We remember to remain steadfast combating anti-Semitism in all its forms, and we remember to counter any attempt to deny or minimize what truly occurred more than 70 years ago so that it will never happen again. Thank you to the organizers, the leaders of the March of Remembrance Houston for your efforts every year to never forget the past. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to send you this message on this important day. Sincerely, Senator Ted Cruz.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. Ruth, you are an absolute hero to me, and I want to give you a big hand again for being an upstander after all of us. Thank you. But today, I've been praying to God. I don't write my comments down. I always pray as I'm getting ready to speak, and so if you don't like what I say, I'm going to blame on the good Lord up above. But I am an upstander, and I'm the nephew of a man named Billy, who was a French Jew, who as a child I remember him with his gregarious, beautiful personality, but more importantly, the tattoo on his arm that was a serial number that marked him as an enemy of the state simply because of the faith that he chose to follow. And today I've got to tell you, as your police chief of the most welcoming city led by Sylvester Turner and the most diverse city arguably on planet Earth, that the times are not great in this nation and on this planet. That we as upstanders need not to just remember history and remember the Holocaust and take on the deniers of the Holocaust. We need to start taking on the political rhetoric today that's happening in our country, where we're painting people with broad brushes. We're painting people of color, you're thugs. If you're from Africa, it's a bad place. Nobody should be allowed from Africa. If you're a Muslim, you're all terrorists. If you wear this uniform, you must be a rogue cop. The truth of the matter is, we need to pay attention to what's going on in our own country, because this rhetoric is leading to an increase in hate. Hate against people that may not look like some of the people whose own inner demons are being fueled by the political rhetoric. And we need to speak up. I'm proud as your police chief to say that history will not speak of this chief, this department, this generation of police leaders as doing what the German police did, which is nothing. We will continue to speak up, we will continue to speak out, and we will call out. You see, I'm not here to keep a job, I'm here to do a job. And when I hear people painting the Black Lives Matter and elected officials as they're all a bunch of terrorists, I'm going to speak out against them, because that is a legitimate movement. And when I hear people say that the immigrants that are coming from the South are rapists and murderers and painting us with these broad brushes, I'm going to speak out against them, because those broad brushes need to be put away. We need to stand up for one another. We need to treat people and judge people through the content of what's in their own hearts and their actions, and not through political rhetoric that just feeds the base of out-of-touch parties. So with that, I just want to thank you, but I have to urge you, we can't talk about it behind these walls. We need to talk about it on the streets, and we need to take action at the voting polls, where these politicians that say they stand for something, that when you look at what's happening right now, when we're talking about separating children from their families, because they happen to be coming from the south of the border under the guise of protecting those children, it reminds me of you, Ruth, and I'm not going to stand for it. Neither should you. Let's not forget that the first immigrants in the history of humanity were the Jews, and they were delivered by God himself. So let's stand up for one another. God bless you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. King David wrote in the book of Psalms, chapter 90, verse 10. I'll say it in Hebrew. ימי שנותינו בהם 70 שנה, ואם בגבורות 80 שנה. The days of our years among them are 70 years, and if with might 80 years. Here we are only 73 years after the end of the Second World War. A very short period of time. It is so short that it contains one's lifetime. We gathered here together to tell the darkest chapter of the Jewish history, to remember and never forget, and to say never again. I would like to exploit our local and own Remembrance March and share with you a story of a totally different march. A march of prisoners from one small labor camp. Daniel Jonah Goldhagen, in his monumental book, Ordinarily Germans and the Holocaust, tells in details the story of Helmbrecht's camp. The inhabitants of this camp were Jewish prisoners who were forced to march a death march during the last weeks of the Nazi regime. Helmbrecht's camp was a labor camp for women only. The camp was located on the outskirts of a town called Hof in western Germany, 100 miles north of the notorious city of Nuremberg, the same Nuremberg that played an essential and evil part in modern history. In Nuremberg, the Germans took their first step of discriminating the Jews in what is known today the Nuremberg laws. These laws legalized the discrimination of all Jews throughout Europe. These same laws helped the Nazi regime to execute their satanic plan that began by shoving the Jews into small ghettos and eventually led the Third Reich to construct death camps and ultimately design those camps to serve as factories of death that enabled the Nazis to commit brutal mass murder of more than 6 million of my people. A third of the Jewish nation. So what exactly happened in this unknown Helmbrecht's labor camp? On the 13th of April, 1945, 73 years ago, almost on the day, less than 4 weeks before the end of the war, there were between 670 or 680 Jewish women from all ages that were prisoned and belonged to the camp. The name of the infamous commander of the camp was Elois Der. The camp was his private kingdom. He was looked like a god. He decided who will live and who will meet death. As the war was coming to its end, when the Red Army infiltrated Germany and the final defeat was days or weeks away, even then, and even though the commander there understood that his fate is doomed, he decided not to surrender, but rather to torture and kill as many of his Jewish prisoners. His decision was to evacuate the camp with the Jewish prisoners and flee by foot as far as possible from the preceding Russian army. There was no specific destination. His intention was to walk day in and day out and wear out the starving prisoners until they literally dropped dead. As they passed through the gates of the camp, trembling, shivering, with only rags to their skinny, bony bodies, most of the prisoners had no shoes. Hungry and exhausted, they were forced, out into the wilderness. The 54 guards that escorted them were all well dressed for the long, cold journey. They were fed well, and above all, they had weapons and clubs to teach these vulnerable women a lesson. During the endless march, the sick and weak Jewish women walked an average of 10 miles a day. They were dragged without food or water, in icy, freezing cold weather, with no time to rest. During the march, they passed villages, towns, and major cities. No one, not even one, of the 10,000s of the bystanders throughout the trail of the march helped or even encouraged them. They were all by themselves. They felt defenseless. It was them, a small and petty group, against their entire world. 22 long days. More than 3 whole weeks lasted their death march. During those days, they walked 197 miles. 670 women started the fatiguing march, and only 395 made it to the end. 275 of the miserable prisoners were murdered or died of exhaustion during the 22 days. 41% of the Jewish women prisoners who started the march perished during only 3 weeks. These numbers are almost beyond understanding. This high percentage of death in such a short period of time was way more than any rate of death in any death camp known. More than Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, Treblinka, or any other death camp. So here we are, marching today in the floral street of Houston, marching only a few hundred feet, together, united, remembering the 6 million Jews that were butchered to death only because they were Jews. As the proud official representative of the State of Israel, the state of the Jewish people, I promise to my beloved holy brothers and sisters that we will never forget them. I vow to you all that their memory will always guide us. And I swear to you, in the name of the State of Israel, Am Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. The people of Israel are alive and will live for eternity. Thank you to you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Thomas Meister. I'm the German Consul General, and it is my honor to introduce Risa and Desiree today and also to share a few thoughts with you. For me, it's an honor to share this day of commemoration with you here at Rice University. Ladies and gentlemen, Germany's name is linked to the Holocaust, and in a long and difficult process, we Germans learned the lessons from our history. In the last 70 years, Germany's history has been shaped by coming to terms with its past. The question has been what we can do to ensure that such outrageous deviation from all the values that we have been proud of since the era of Enlightenment can never happen again. Today, in Germany, there's an overwhelming consensus that Our past makes it our duty to combat all forms of anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. Anyone who comes to our country who wants to live amongst us must know that we will not abide any racism, intolerance, or anti-Semitism. Incitement to ethnic or racial hatred or Holocaust denial remain a crime in Germany and are severely punished. This week, the newly formed German government nominated a first anti-Semitism commissioner. The commissioner's tasks, among others, will be to counter growing hate speech against Jews and Israel in our country from the far right and from recent migrants from the Muslim communities. The responsibility for our past also shapes our foreign policy. This is particularly evident in our country's relationship with the State of Israel. Germany's special historical responsibility for Israel's security is part of our country's raison d'etre, as Angela Merkel, our Chancellor, has pointed out so many times. It is gratifying to note that Germany, for Israelis today, is a destination of choice. In Berlin alone, you can meet around 18,000 Israelis. More than 500,000 young Germans and Israelis have visited each other's countries in the past. And we are proud that Jews again have placed confidence in our country. Today, Germany has the third largest Jewish community in Europe. Jewish kindergartens and schools are emerging, and there are about 110 German Jewish communities throughout the country with more than 100,000 active members. These are very encouraging developments. And now I would like to introduce two members of the March of Life, March of Remembrance movement from Germany. They flew in to share with you about their involvement of the families in World War II and why they are part of the March of Remembrance movement today. Luisa Ludwig is 25 years old. She's from the city of Mönchengladbach, which is close to my hometown on the Lower Rhine. And she has a BA in Cultural Studies and American Studies, and she's finishing a master's degree in Cultural Studies this year. And Desiree Siering, 31 years of age, was also born and raised in Germany. She's a medical doctor and works as an internist at a hospital near Tübingen.
Thank you to everyone for listening to me today, and thank you for the March of Remembrance organizers to allowing me to speak today. My name is Luisa Ludwig, and I'm here today because I want to break the veil of silence over the cruelties that my family committed during the World War II. Through researches I have done in the last years, I found out that 3 of my great-grandfathers were in Poland and Russia, former Yugoslavia, and Greece. One of my great-grandfathers, whose name is Heinrich Reinders, was part of an SS police battalion. In 1939, he marched into Poland, expelling, plundering, and deporting the Jewish and Polish population. In 1941 to 1943, he was in a concentration camp near Belgrade in Serbia, and there he was responsible for supervising the concentration camp, and he was shooting Serbian, Gypsy, and Jewish people. I am the 4th generation after my great-grandfather, and in my family we never spoke about this. The more I looked at the truth about my great-grandfather and my family, the more I found out that part of this is in me. I realized that anti-Semitism is as well in my heart. I never knew Jewish people, but in my heart I had something against them. I was indifferent about what happened in the Holocaust. When I heard it in school, it did not really touch me. I didn't really care. And the indifference also came because of the silence from my family. This is the reason why I'm part of the March of Remembrance. I do not want to accept the silence anymore. I want to raise my voice, and I do not want to just raise my voice. I want to go on the streets and I want to share the truth And I want to tell you that I will never forget. I will never forget what happened. And I stand in friendship with Israel. It must never happen again. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon. My name is Desiree, and 3 years ago I started to do researches about my family, and I got information that my grandfathers and my great-grandfathers were involved in the Second World War. One of my grandfather, he was a part of Hitler's party, and he was in the war for 6 years. My other grandfather, he went through Poland to Belarus to Russia, and I went to Belarus last year, but before I got some information about the plans from Germany for Belarus. And the plans were to destroy the land, to kill the people, and to take the food for the Wehrmacht soldiers. And in Belarus, I stood next to a grave where 5,000 Jewish people were buried. And suddenly I really realized that it was my family, it was my nation, and that we are responsible for the consequences that follow the war. And you have to know, I always grew up to be proud to be a German. I was proud to have blonde hairs and blue eyes. And I was in Auschwitz this year, for 3 weeks ago, and I felt so ashamed. I felt really ashamed to be a German. And this is why I am a part of the March of Remembrance, to talk about my history, to talk about and to break the silence and to remember. I'm an upstander. Thank you.
If you are a survivor or a second gen, please come forward and connect with them. Please come forward, and you can, girls, just stay right there. Any survivors or families of survivors or Jewish people, please come and give them a hug or something. They came on their own funds to speak for 5 minutes from Germany. A lot of them, I mean, one of them, it's their first time in America. All we did was go to the mall yesterday. I mean, they're here for you. No, you just talk to them. Okay, please come and just connect with them to the side. I just want to, while they're doing that, these people have broken the veil of silence and are willing to confess their own sin. You know, there's a scripture in Psalms, twice King David says it. And he says, a broken spirit and a contrite heart I will not despise. That is the kind of sacrifice that the Lord wants from us. Raise your hand if you have had any kind of prejudice against any type of people. Please just raise your hand, let's be honest. This is breaking the veil of silence time. This is the atmosphere. And I just want you to just take that hand and just put it on your heart for a moment. Just close your eyes and ask the Lord to forgive you for this prejudice or stereotype, or any time you were silent when you saw injustice or going on around you. This is just your time there, where you are, while they're connecting here. Lord, and I ask you to forgive us for our own types of prejudice. It could be against a person with gray hair, just because someone with gray hair once abused you. We have issues with people, not just against religion or race. Women, men, whatever. I ask for a complete healing from that Lord above for all of us. In fact, that scripture says that the Lord will draw near to you when you have a broken spirit and a contrite heart. The only reason that we do these marches is to help all of us, different types of conflicting groups. I know I have a friend here, I won't say who she is. I invited her to come, and her family's from Ramallah, and we're becoming good friends. Is that good? Palestinian, Arabs, and Jews? Is that a good thing? Yes. When I was in Germany and I met the founder of this March of Life, Pastor Jobst Bittner, and there were survivors speaking amongst all of them, I saw hundreds of people like Louisa and Desiree weeping and broken in their seats. They found out my parents were Holocaust survivors, and I was videoing, and they lined up behind me, begging me to just forgive themselves for just being indifferent and their own type of prejudice that was passed down from their families. And I also want to tell you that it's because of Christians who put feet to their faith, like we're going to do today. We're going to be public and we're going to march. We're not going to just do this like the chief of police said. Don't keep it just in a little church or in your homes. Go to the streets and declare never again. That's what we're doing today. It was Christians who put feet to their faith that hid my parents, and that's why I get to be here today, and I'm thankful.
Well, I think you can see that the March of Remembrance is about remembering, reconciling, and taking a stand. And I hope you also understand that one thing it is not is a political stunt or political statement. It's about the issues of the heart. And this is why we do what we do. If people wonder why we have the March of Remembrance every year, it's because there are issues of the heart that need to be resolved. So we're grateful for that. I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, and what he has to say will have an impact on how you view the actual memorial walk we're about to take. And we're honored to have him. We wanted to have a professor representing Rice University for obvious reasons. So I got on, since I didn't know any professors at Rice, I got online, great tool, and I looked through the bios of all the professors listed in the Department of History, and Professor Peter Caldwell, his bio really touched my heart. I happen to have some experience in Germany myself. So I scrutinized the topics of dissertations and things that he had published. And in addition to serving as the chairman of the Rice University History Department, Professor Caldwell is the Samuel McMahon Professor of History and a Humboldt Fellow. And his scholarly work has focused on the meanings of democracy and constitutionalism in Germany's First Republic, conservatism and state theory, legal theory and the welfare state, and the economics and law planning under state socialism. But not only is Professor Caldwell a gifted and thorough researcher, he also is an award-winning teacher at Rice. And we invited him to talk a bit about the death marches so you'll understand why we need marches of life. Dr. Caldwell, please come.
I want this conversation to continue. It's actually very moving. On the other hand, I know that we have a march, and so I want to go ahead and say a few words, move away from the experiences we're talking about, and provide some context to understand what these are, what we're actually commemorating right now. In mid-1944, the German army was in retreat. Heinrich Himmler, who was head of the SS and its massive apparatus across Eastern and Western Europe, apparatus of death and labor camps, he issued an order to the local commanders of camps. He ordered the commanders in an extreme case to quote-unquote evacuate the camps and keep the prisoners from falling into the hands of the Red Army. In other words, to keep the prisoners from being liberated. Now, here's an interesting question we historians asked. Why exactly did he do this? It's actually not clear. Was he aiming to save forced laborers being worked to death for the war effort? Was he aiming to keep prisoners as human shields for his bargaining chips? Was he aiming to hide the evidence and continue the killing? It's actually not clear from the record, which means that the orders came down to the local commanders to make their own decisions about what the death camps were going to be. Many of these local commanders, of course, old SS men. All of the motives played a role. The chaos and disorder of the end of the war added to the chaos of the Nazi regime itself, which was chaotic, and order was given without a clear purpose to the local commanders. In early 1945, the Red Army was reaching the camps in the east. Local commanders ordered in total around 700,000 prisoners. The largest group of these prisoners was Jewish. There were also POWs and political prisoners in that group. They were ordered to march. Where? These rows of prisoners, let's imagine the moment. These rows of prisoners were not alone moving westward. They were accompanied by hundreds of thousands, eventually millions of others, especially ethnic Germans, moving westward in front of the Red Army. But the prisoners were different. They were poorly clothed. They were ill-fed. They were exhausted. And let's recall, I said there's a number of different prisoners marching. The ones who were in the worst shape, the ones treated worse in the camp, were the Jews. Meanwhile, the ethnic Germans moving westward as well were being inundated with propaganda about what the Red Army was going to do with them, associating Jews with Bolsheviks. The killing began. Already we're talking about the coldness of late January 1945. As individual prisoners stumble, the initial killing begins. Individual guards shoot them, take matters into their own hands. Why? They think that might be what this prison march is about. Or, more likely, many of them are trying to save their own lives, get rid of the people who are going too slow as they move away from the Red Army. They increasingly single out groups they think are less able to march, especially leading Jewish women. They murder them. You have to imagine on these roads, as all these people are moving across them to the west, there are increasing numbers of bodies in the cold, in the snow, in shallow graves. And in some cases, SS officers begin to carry out especially sadistic acts. Civilians participated as well. Not all, but there were certainly cases where civilians were part of the atrocities. Not all the victims were Jewish. In at least one case, an historian found a French POW was beaten to death. He was called a Jewish Bolshevik by the civilians who participated. This last point is important for our march today. The Nazi regime coded certain people as enemies, singled them out for elimination. The killing and the death marches bore traces of this coding. It coded the killing going on there. It took specific forms also related to the chaos of the war, but it connects to the overall sense of the Nazi regime. In the end, over a third of the estimated 700,000 in the death marches, which occurred at different times in different places, over a third perished. This is the logic of anti-Semitism and racism. Our purpose today, when we see the resurgence of racism and extremism in our schools, which my daughter here in Houston has sadly reported, in our communities, in our politics, we need to fight the resurgence of this extremism, of this racism, of this anti-Semitism as we can. Thank you.
My name is Mitch Jerome, and you don't have to be in this room for a long time to figure out the weightiness of the issues at hand. You're a special group of people that would come out today, making yourselves vocal and soon to be visible in our march. Today you gave us something very precious, your time, and I'm now going to ask you to give us something just as precious called your resources, your monies, to keep this cause going. If the ushers will come forward. Anti-Semitism isn't going away anytime soon. I guess it won't be until Messiah comes. It wasn't long ago that we read about the white supremacist right here in our country in D.C., Richard Spencer, speaking to a packed ballroom in D.C., and he garnered Nazi salutes at the end of his talk. It wasn't but a year and a half ago, a Jewish journalist, Jonathan Weissman for the Times, just read an article on the rise of fascism in America, and all he did was tweet about it. And his life has never been the same after that. He suddenly saw his name in triple parentheses. That's a symbol by the anti-Semites, the neo-Nazis, to identify you as a Jewish person and target you with online harassment. The ADL recorded approximately 20,000 threats to journalists nationwide from our last election. Recently, Jewish college students voicing an opposing view to the BDS movement find themselves isolated by other students and often confronted by anti-Semitic rhetoric and behavior, and worse. Seems like truth is the new hate speech in America. Evil prevails when good people, good men do nothing. Countries with the lowest rates of anti-Semitism, like America, have a Jewish presence, and they have righteous Christians standing with them and responding to these vile anti-Semitic remarks. Though Houston is 6 million strong, we here are the remnant here today, maybe 300, 500 people, and will continue to stand. There are 300 cities in 13 countries doing these marches this year. This Houston march cost about $20,000, printing, advertising, insurance, airfare, rental, etc. And your support is really needed to keep this alive. Just this week, if you heard the news, it was reported that 2/3 of the millennials, those are people 22 to 37, never heard of Auschwitz. 22% never even heard of the Holocaust. A generation perhaps too busy taking selfies versus manning the mantles of never again. We here need to keep speaking and standing because nobody else will. Thank you for your generous and continuing support for the March of Remembrance. In 3 weeks, we'll be marching in Jerusalem. It's their first march. We're expecting 3,000 people joining hands, saying never again. so keep us in your prayers. There are envelopes on your chairs. If you need one, raise your hands and the ushers will bring you one. Credit cards, cash, checks, they all work. You can make them out to the March of Remembrance. We're a 501c3. And while you're writing, you can enjoy the music here of Chris Holloway.
I would like to offer a prayer and song. But before I do, for those that are not real familiar with the language, I would like to, since I am singing it in Hebrew, I would like to offer the translation for you. Our Father who is in heaven, Rock and Redeemer of the people of Israel, bless the state of Israel, the Jewish people, and all of us that trust in your holy name, and grant with its promise of redemption, shield it with your love and spread over it the shelter of your peace. Our Father who is in heaven, Rock and Redeemer of the people Israel, send your light and your truth to its leaders, its ministers, its advisors, and establish them with good counsel before you. Our Father who is in heaven, Rock and Redeemer of the people Israel, strengthen the hands of those who defend your holy land. Deliver them and crown their efforts with triumph and salvation, victory. Bless this land with peace, O God, and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. And we ask you, Lord, to catch for us, the foxes that are spoiling your vineyard. Amen. I think the orchestra is just tuning up. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry. Are you getting any feed there or not? I'll sing it a cappella then. Avinu shebashamayim, tzur Yisrael v'golo, barek et medinat Yisrael, reshit smichot geulateinu. Again, aleha, bevrot hasdecha. Betaknem, Betaknem, Beitzatova, Beitzatova, Milfanecha, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Israel vegohalo, Barek et Medinat Israel. Reshit smichat geulatenu, strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Avinu Sheba Shamayim, deliver them and crown their efforts with triumph. Avinu Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Israel vegohalo. Bless our land with peace, O God, and its inhabitants with lasting joy, and let us say, Amen. Amen. Avinu Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Israel vegohalo, Barek et Medinat Israel. Reshit smichat geulatenu, Hagen, Hagen aleha, Be'evrat, Be'evrat hasdecha, Ufros aleha, aleha, Sukkot, Sukkot, Shlomecha, Ve'omar, Amen. Ve'omar, Amen.
There's room for all.
There's room for all. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to pronounce blessings out of the book of Numbers. It says, God spoke to Moses, tell Aaron and his sons, this is how you are to bless the people of Israel. Say to them, God bless you and God keep you. God smile on you and gift you. God look you full in the face and make you prosper. May God add a blessing.
I'm going to recite that blessing in the Hebrew, and you've already heard it once today when Rabbi Strauss blessed Ruth Steinfeld and her daughter. But before I do, and I know we're just about on schedule, I want to say something quickly about Upstanders, because this is a program, this March of Remembrance, that started 7 years ago with a vision from Rosalie Jerome, who decided that Texans need to be upstanders. And some people have tirelessly helped her, including her husband Mitch, Chris Ege, Jeff Craig, and many, many, many other volunteers. Chief Acevedo said it's time to stop painting everyone with the brushes, the wide brushes of labeling, treating people as individuals, and every day we hear, and we've heard it several times today, that anti-Semitism is rising in the world, in America, in Europe, and I say, I cannot deny that. But I also say, so is tolerance and understanding. So are people who are interested in learning about how to treat one another as individuals. When the Consul General of Israel can share the pulpit with the Consul General of Germany, and we learn about an anti-Semitism commissioner in Germany, to be able to say, we don't forget the past and we're going to focus on the future. That these are the upstanders who are going to go on that journey. As the pastor just said, this comes from the book of Numbers, which in Hebrew is Bamidbar, the wilderness. We take a walk like our ancestors walked from the narrowness of Egypt through a wilderness into the promised land. And as our other ancestors marched on the death march, we call this a march of life, as we are going to say, these are the upstanders, and this is how we take our journey to be blessed. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God bless you and protect you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God's presence be with you and give you peace. And we all say,
Well, I've got that look, so we have to do this pretty quick. Real quickly, I want to acknowledge our Corps of Cadets here in the white. This is the third year now in a row they participated in the march, and I can't thank you enough, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're going to try to do this in best order we can. Could all the rabbis and pastors please stand? We're going to have you exit out the back, and you will go to station number 1, sidewalk number 1. All pastors and rabbis. Our next group will be all university and college professors, plus other educators and teachers. Would you please rise? We'll have you also march out the back. You will go to station number 2. Number 2. I see Lone Stars here. How you doing, brother? Our foreign consulates, please. We have Israel, Germany, Japan, and Hungary. I hope I'm not missing anybody. Would you please rise? Exit out the back. You will go to station number 2. Thank you. Our next group will be Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commissioners. Would you please rise? Have you go out the door. You will be in station number 4. All of our distinguished Holocaust survivors and their families, please stand. back door, you will be in station number 5. Ma'am. We need to get, there's Rosalie. She's got you covered. Number 5 on that one. Our flag bearers, all of our flag bearers, and March of Remembrance flag bearers of various nations. Would you please stand? We'll have you also exit after them. You will be going to station number 6. Number 6. Liberators and rescuers, World War II veterans and descendants. Please rise, exit out the rear door, station number 7. Number 7.